place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins, Makeshift Stories presents a monthly journey into the improbable.
This month's story, 162, An Eye for an Eye, read by Mitchell Tew. Somewhere and sometime, the desire for retribution might take you down a path you do not want to go. Limbo 5 watched the results of her spider as it crawled the public health net, looking for unpatched back doors into a Dentist Model D5A robotic dental surgeon. The D5s were generally hot targets, being obsolete machines repurposed to provide dental care to the euphemistically named pointless masses, which she had once been part of. They were rarely updated, and therefore easy to hack. It took only a few seconds before the targeted machine pinged back with a match, one Indra Reddy, a very common name, and a person of no consequence, one of the thousands of Indras born 2 decades ago when the name was popular in the Ramble. Indra had been a pop star, one of the lucky few to escape the slums of the ironically misnamed Gardens, so of course every parent had wanted their son to be an Indra. This one was the perfect mark. He would never miss a bit of DNA. Limbo 5, aka Krisha Dar, inserted her custom-coded agent into the machine's RAM and watched through the dental drill's microcam as it entered the nerve of Indra's left mandibular molar. She let the machine finish the root canal, but instead of depositing the biological waste in the sanitary incinerator, she directed the robot to place the tissue in a sterile vial and request a pickup. The vial, and its contents, would eventually end up at her new client's predetermined drop location, near the bridge gate to Walltown. Normally, that would be the end of the gig, but Krisha didn't have any other jobs that day, and it would be several hours before her daughter got home. So, curious, she did something she hadn't done in years. She hacked into the Medibooth security cam to look around. As the vid feed flickered to life, she saw a nondescript young man, one of thousands who used the grungy street side booths for affordable medical and dental services. Even with the obsolete bot, the less-than-sanitary recycled Medigear, and expired consumables, the procedure had probably cost young Indra a month's wages, if he were lucky enough to work. If not, he'd spend a year paying off one of the parasitic finance companies which accepted indentured labor as payment. Krisha shuddered at the thought, closed the feed, and had the bot purge its RAM, deleting her highly illegal hijacking app. She looked around her modest apartment. She had done well for herself and her daughter. Better, in fact, than anyone would have expected from an uneducated woman from the Gardens. The slum, which most people referred to as the Ramble, was sandwiched between the barren mountains and the banks of the now mostly dry Fraser River. The river acted as a barrier, which kept the tightly packed, unsightly masses from spreading too close to the Northwest Pacific Enclave and Walltown. Krisha had been luckier than most. Her father had worked in an electronic recycling plant, feeding circuit boards into grinders and shakers to filter out the copper, gold, indium, and tantalum. It was one of the few jobs no one wanted to spend the money to automate, and, with the surplus of labor, there was no incentive to. Krisha could remember his smell when he came home in the late evening, burnt plastic, ozone, and an acrid mix of machine oil and chemicals. He was usually covered in a fine gray dust. By 9, she had managed to build a functioning computer from the parts and used it to learn programming. Thinking back on it, she now realized her father had probably risked his job, smuggling the parts out in his lunchbox. By 15, she knew more than most of the programmers she met on the web, through the net service they had stolen by splicing a cable her dad had smuggled out into a data line. For some unfathomable reason, the live fiber optic cables still ran down their street, on an ancient telephone pole, in a spider nest of cables no one had bothered to take down. Obviously, it had been cheaper to simply string another cable than fix the old ones. Who cared if the sun over a nameless street in the Gardens was shaded out by a mass of wire that looked like an insane giant spider had been at work? Despite her skills, Krisha soon discovered that a self-trained developer from the Rambles was not going to be hired by anyone. It was around that time she was first recruited by a group from the dark net looking for talent who would do the work and not ask questions. They paid in untraceable cryptocurrency, so if she was ever caught in a hack, they could simply disappear back into the digital noise, leaving her holding the bag. It was a risky business, but the pay reflected the danger. Hacking the Medibooths was low on the scale of illicit activity, so up to now, Krisha had never been too worried. Nobody really cared if a booth's security had been compromised, as long as the operations weren't affected and the money continued to roll in. So no one ever bothered to upgrade them. It was a good, if a bit repetitive and boring, job, but it had financed Krisha's escape from the Rambles and move across the river to the more prosperous Walltown. Still not inside the enclave proper, Walltown was where people with enough money could go to escape the rusting, cold shipping containers which made up most of the Ramble. She never bothered thinking about what was happening to the DNA she was harvesting from the garden, and didn't want to know, other than the vague comment a buyer had once made about medical research. That had given her the rationale she had used up until now to justify her dark market career as mostly benign. A notification popped up in the corner of her screen, another gig. She read the order from the new client, then had her crawler start to look for a match. If the frequency from this new source kept up, Krisha would be able to start saving for her daughter's college. She wanted Emily to have a legitimate, above-board career, not a life dependent on the unpredictable whims of the dark net. 2 weeks later, Krisha was finishing another job for the new client. Like the last order, they wanted a man in his late teens, mixed heritage, along with specific height, hair, eye color, and weight requirements. Most buyers didn't care about those types of specifics, but the new client was very insistent on the matching criteria, which was the same from target to target. She was wondering why someone would need multiple matches from the same profile when her daughter, Emily, arrived home. She quickly placed a backtracker on her new client's latest order, which would be risky if the client ever discovered it. However, there was something itching at the back of her mind, which told her to take the risk and find out as much as she could. "Mom." Krisha turned around to discover her daughter looked more upset than the time she had lost her stuffed bear on a bus when she was 4. She logged out of her workstation. As far as her daughter was concerned, she was a freelance coder for several Asian companies, and the less Emily knew about what she did, the more her daughter would be protected in case something went wrong. Emily had plunked herself down on the couch in their tiny living space, which served as Emily's bedroom, the family living room, and dining room. Emily's eyes were red and puffy from crying. "What is it, Emily?" Alarmed, Krisha sat down and put her arm around her daughter. "He's been arrested, Mom. They came into school and took him away in zip ties." "Who, honey? Who'd they arrest?" "My friend, Indra." The familiar name knifed into Krisha, making her feel sick. She remembered an Indra from the other week. But there were so many Indras, she told herself. It was just a coincidence. Tell me what happened." She tried to console her daughter. Emily leaned into her shoulder. "I met him at the start of term." This didn't entirely surprise Krisha. There were many things she didn't know about her daughter anymore. "He's just a friend, Mom, but a close one. He works part-time at the hotel, cleaning rooms. He wasn't into anything illegal. That isn't him. There must have been a mistake, but I don't know how to help him." Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, pulled out her phone, opened its photo gallery, then clicked on a picture and handed the device to her mother. "That's him, beside me. We all went out last weekend." Krisha apprehensively took the phone and stared at a photo taken in a crowded plaza near the center of Walltown. 5 bright, young, enthusiastic faces crowded the frame, staring back. The young man to the left of her daughter made her stomach lurch. "Is he from the gardens?" she asked, hoping she was wrong. "How did you know? He's only told me and a few friends. Indra's trying to climb out of it like you did. His aunt has a place on this side of the river where he's staying, but I think he spends a lot of time in the Ramble. The rest of his family's still there. Krisha didn't respond. She continued scrutinizing the tiny screen. There, beside her daughter, was the face of 1,000 young men from the slums, who had greeted her on the Medibooth security cam 2 weeks ago. Again, she tried and failed to convince herself it was just a coincidence. After all, how many people's DNA had she hijacked over the years? One of the targets was eventually going to end up close to her, and given life in the Ramble, be involved in something nefarious. But something in her gut told her this Indra wasn't just a statistical inevitability. She hid her reaction from her daughter, who had pulled out her tablet and was intently scanning the local newsfeed. This isn't Indra. It can't be. I know him too well. He'd never do anything like this. Emily protested, more tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. She turned the screen so her mother could read the headline. DNA evidence used to arrest 2 youth from the Gardens in connection with last week's data center break-in. Indra was listed along with another familiar name, which at first she couldn't place, but soon realized was another profile she had harvested for her new client. Krisha fell back into her chair, feeling like she was about to vomit. What is it, Mom? Are you okay? Krisha sat in the coffee shop, thinking this was the stupidest thing she had done in her life. She had made direct contact with her new client, claiming this was part of her usual vetting process, which should have thrown up red flags. She hoped the acceptance of the meeting invite meant the client was new to the dark net and were incredibly naive. Anyone experienced would have refused her, immediately ceased contact, then tagged her as unreliable in the darknet community. She had taken a big risk placing a tracking agent on this guy, which could have destroyed her only means to make a living, or worse. But nothing had happened. Her software agents had quickly tracked the client to an IP located at the drop location in the Ramble, where she had her harvested samples delivered. From there, she had tagged the courier who picked them up, hacked into their systems to find the address and name of the recipient, who in turn delivered them to one Noah Logan, the son of a well-known enclave plutocrat. This was as problematic and potentially dangerous as crossing a darknet buyer. The coffee shop she had picked was at the opposite end of Walltown from where she lived, just beyond the main eastern enclave gate with its private army of guards and immigration police, there to ensure people like her couldn't slip in. No one entered the enclave unless they lived or had legitimate work there. Krisha's attention was drawn to a young man crossing the street. It wasn't Indra, but if she only glanced at the man out of the corner of her eye, she could easily mistake him for her daughter's friend. It explained why he had been so specific. He waited for a nod of traffic to pass by, then approached the sidewalk patio where Krisha was sitting. "Limbo 5?" he asked. "Yes, and you're Hades' nemesis?" Krisha confirmed. They had agreed to keep their real names secret. She was aware he had hired another darknet contractor to find out her real identity, but they hadn't gotten anywhere. She had too many layers of hardened crypto around her. Added to that, she had hacked into the official records years ago and replaced her picture with a person she had found on an obituary site. So, even if he took a photo, which she knew he would, no facial recognition system would ever be able to match her face to a name. Despite her precautions, Krisha knew how easily this could go sideways, but it was the only way she could get what she needed. "So, how can I help you?" Logan gave a smile, which didn't reach his eyes, then sat down without being invited. "I just like to know who I'm working with. Makes me feel better, more secure, if you know what I mean. You've seen me, I've seen you, which ties both of us to what we're doing. In other words, I have a face in case you decide to do something stupid. Better than a name, almost as good as DNA, right?" "And that goes both ways." His voice was as cold as his smile and caused a shiver to race up Krisha's back. "I grabbed a photo of you before you even noticed me, in case you were wondering. but I assumed you knew I would do that. I like the idea of mutual culpability, and you are a very distinctive woman. Your face will be easy to tag. Maybe I should ask for a discount on the next job. What do you think?" he laughed. My face, on the other hand, has been very carefully sculpted to look common, one of any thousands over there. He nodded in the direction of the ramble. I like your boldness, but as I've said, unlike you, I look like one of thousands, so my image is nothing like a DNA match. I have plausible deniability. It was a gift from my parents for situations like this. Do you read the local news? Did he know, or was he just trying to goad her? Krisha was starting to lose her confidence. Maybe, he continued, you like it when the game gets a bit more dangerous. And you are as addicted to the risk and thrill as I am. I like that too. Your request perked my interest. It added some unexpected complexity and challenge. It was getting too easy. But I'm guessing you're worried, maybe getting cold feet? We both understand that no one cares about a few losers from the ramble. That's why people like us operate there. No one will be looking into hijacked DNA or care how it's used, right? But just in case. He had dropped the pretense of a smile and pulled out a small camera. I'm going to take another shot of you, so you know I have a good clear picture I can use to ID you. If I need to. Great insurance. Thanks. Krisha hid her anger and concluded this guy was just another arrogant enclave oligarch who didn't care how their actions impacted anyone as long as they managed to amuse themselves or make money. And she assumed doing both at the same time was probably a bonus. I'm not worried. This is just how I do business. I'm glad we could meet, Hades' nemesis. Even his handle was pretentious. Really? 2 Greek gods? Krisha held out her hand for him to shake. At first, he just stared at it, as if her hand was a vector for disease, and for a brief second, she thought that her plan might fail. Then he smiled and shook hands, but quickly pulled away, examining his palm. She knew he would find nothing. The skin pricks were too small. I think that was just a static electric shock, she explained, hoping he accepted the explanation. After what seemed like minutes, he finally shrugged. I may have another job for you soon. He smiled slyly. But I'll expect a discount. Then he disappeared back into the crowded street. Krisha deflated into her chair. It had worked. She had a tissue sample. She had his DNA. It hadn't been hard to find a no-questions-asked DNA splicer who was willing to clone enough material to make the next part of her plan possible. Finding the right buyer, one she could count on to use Nolan's DNA to salt a crime scene, was harder, and she had been disturbed by the one she found. Was the material she was selling going to be the catalyst for a crime rather than covering one up? She didn't feel comfortable with the implications. If she went through with her plan, would it pull her down to the level of Nolan Logan and the other arrogant oligarchs who thought they could do anything they wanted? Would it solve anything? Or stop another innocent person in the ramble from paying for the actions of some enclave bad actor? Thinking about the arrogance of his class and their exploitation of the rambles helped to fortify her resolve. All Krisha had to do was send the message to deliver the package. She couldn't help Indra, but Nolan would also pay. An eye for an eye. On the surface, it seemed fair, but something was holding her back. Mom? It was Emily. She was home earlier than Krisha had expected. What are you up to, Mom? Krisha's finger hovered over the enter key, then decided which road to take. Makeshift Stories is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB Financial. To listen to other great APN podcasts such as the read-along, please head over to albertapodcastnetwork.com. Starting or building a business? ATB's Entrepreneur Center is a great place to go. Of course, they can help you with your banking, but they also offer workshops and networking opportunities. They can also help you get set up with a mentor. To check this out and other great cutting-edge services, please head over to atb.com. Makeshift Stories Somewhere Sometime is released once a month between the 15th and the 20th. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Mitchell Tew. Opening and closing music was composed and recorded by David Hume. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. You can help us out by writing a review on Stitcher Radio or Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast services. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution no derivative license, which means that you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.